Thank you, and it's great to be here. Before I go on, I want to introduce my colleague Will and Reese, who is up in the farm with Wisconsin, probably still on the ground at Nashville. And he's one of our community development county-based educators, and he's going to be joining us for the late month. Hello, Will. Well, first I want to thank you for the warm welcome and inviting us to talk a little bit about our Wisconsin experiences with folks in Nebraska. And I'm also actually, having listened to the previous presentation and even conversations last night, really thankful that Wisconsin and Nebraska don't play each other on the football field this year, because I feel like that would have been a no-win situation for the Wisconsin folks. So, we could just be on peaceful terms and kind of we're neutral to each other. We won't talk about this. The other thing I would say is that we're also celebrating our centennial of 4-H development in Wisconsin this coming year, and we've been thinking a lot of that talk next door sounded familiar, particularly the part about a centennial being not only about looking backwards at where we come from, but about looking forward. And so I want to spend some time today thinking about what are some of the strong pieces that we have to build on, move forward, things that we can do better, particularly related to. And I want to try to argue or try to have a conversation about how what we're really about is community development. That we focus on communities and we focus on families and young people are at the center. So a lot of the conversation next door was about how do we look at the big level, how do we institution building. I want to try to walk out of here with some thoughts about the young people that we work with, the young people that we know, how can we engage them more effectively in the community. And we've used some frameworks that I hope that you can use as you work with young people, as you work with your stakeholders. So, in Wisconsin, we're talking about a lot of the same issues we're talking about here. Bill and I are actually the co-founders of a team called Engaging Young People. Actually, the co-founders of a team in Wisconsin called Engaging Young People in Sustaining Communities, Families, and Farms. And we were challenged in Wisconsin to identify two interdisciplinary teams that would bring our community development, youth development, family living, and agricultural educators together. The two topics that were chosen in Wisconsin were community food systems and engaging young people. Cheryl, I got this muted. Can you help me with your phone? Good. Technology is really fun. You put a lot of pressure on your presenters. They said paperless, there aren't going to be any flip charts in the room, everything's got to be online. So, we're trying to roll with it. And as we brought people together on that Engaging Young People team, I was surprised by the depth of the response from across Extension, that we have lots of agriculture educators, well, a small number of our agriculture educators, to be honest, a lot of our community development educators and a lot of our family living educators who see engaging young people as a core value and a core need, particularly in rural communities. And I also note that when we saw the registration for these sessions, that this one attracted the most folks from Nebraska. So I think this idea of engaging young people in communities is something that really has, it strikes true at this time in our history and strikes true with Extension. I wanted to say that there's also a lot of pressure. I feel like this is a big idea that we're being asked to take on, that we're being asked to think differently, we're being asked to take on sort of larger projects. And I think that we're a piece of a much larger story. And so I want to focus today on what that larger puzzle is. Young people are not going to bring our communities to where they want to be by themselves. They're a critical piece of that. And Extension is not going to bring our communities to where they need to be by ourselves either. So none of us can really act alone in doing this,
But I would say that we are a critical part of that puzzle. We are perfectly positioned to be an essential part of taking communities that are, at least in
maybe a little bit depressed, maybe a little bit negative about what's going on, and moving them toward those other communities that we all think about, which are out there as well, innovative or ambitious. You think about what young people are doing now, bringing orientation for
my experience, too often somewhat closed to newcomers, somewhat closed to young people, maybe a little bit listless, maybe a little bit depressed, maybe a little bit negative about what's going on, and moving them toward those other communities that we all think about, which are out there as what extension is in the right spot, is that we are the ultimate connector. And that was one of the things that Sam Cordes shared next door. I was kind of in and out of that session, but he put up that figure with 5 assets that regional communities have. And does anybody remember what was the thing that was in the middle? Who was paying attention? I wrote it down. It was civic connections was the thing in the middle that tied the rest of it together. And I think extension is in a spot because we're sitting inside government. We have partnerships with volunteers. We have partnerships in the community. We are in a really strong place to be connected. So, but where are we when we ask young people, do they feel connected? Sorry, I've got this clip. It's just not advancing my slides. Okay, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Search Institute's asset surveys. The 2 lowest national assets are when young people are asked if they perceive that adults in their communities value youth, and if they think that young people are given useful roles in their communities. We know that young people are less engaged in voting and other political behaviors than they were in previous decades, but they are more engaged in service than they ever have been. But they often feel like that service isn't taken very seriously, or maybe we're not doing a good job in communities of really valuing the roles that young people play, and they're not really being given enough opportunities to feel like they're contributing. So I want to talk a little bit about how do we move the needle on this. I don't think that they're receiving in their communities. So we've got work to do. I just want to talk quickly about a few concepts that you might be familiar with, and again, these are things that I'm hoping that you might find useful as you're talking to your county boards, your 4-H leaders, your community partners, and other stakeholders. This is an image actually from an international development perspective by a man named Roger Hart, who created a ladder of young people's participation. How many folks have seen this ladder image before? Just a couple? Well, maybe a little, you're not seeing it. Am I not sharing my screen? Is that the issue? Hold on, I see it. There's an image of a ladder. And now you're not. So I'm so glad I've got Cheryl here. It was all working before, right? So this is a ladder that represents how young people participate in activities, organizations, community.
Looking up on the bottom, the ladder talks about young people being manipulated, being brought into a community meeting or some other organization opportunity at declaration. How many folks have seen young people introducing, they look at the young people here, they stand up for them, well, they tokenize, they give them some opportunity to speak up and constantly do their voice. Moving up the ladder, the rest of the things are things that we should do with them. Young people can sometimes be assigned important tasks in the form of the table host last night, I was
you want to just run it from down there? They should be seeing a ladder. Pearson said, look at the young people, they're here. The second piece, the second rung number 5 is that they're consulted and informed. The rung number 6, we're really getting into some partnership activities, but a lot of them are adult initiated, and the young people are brought into shared decision making along the way. You move higher up, young people lead and initiate action and work on their own. And at the top is that young people and adults share decision making. But young people often initiate something, they may have an idea, but in the end it's the whole community, young people and adults working together, that makes something happen. And when I've had people sort of try to put these in order as a puzzle, we've done that as an interactive activity, which is a fun thing to do. Often people put rung 7 higher than rung 8. That when young people that the most important thing we can do is be connected to other people and to be in relationship with other people. And if we're going to get things done in communities, if we're really going to be empowering young people, we need to do that together, and we can't leave them to their own devices. Because who really holds the power in those communities? It's the adults, and they need to be in relationship with the kids. So next one. That's backwards. So what should be a triangle? There we go. This is an image that I like to use also within communities. It was created by Richard Gall from Hampton, Virginia, who was, I think, an early pioneer in doing some of this youth engagement work. And for me, this is a vision of what a community or an organization should look like. And the reason I like it is that all of the levels are really necessary to have a fully engaged community. Sometimes we want to go straight to the top. When I talk to folks about, well, where do young people belong in this picture? They say, well, they should be in shared leadership right at the top. But if you think back to that lot, if we put young people in shared leadership and we don't have opportunities for young people to be contributors, and young people to have input, and you only have them sitting on a board or sitting on some kind of decision-making body, what are we risking doing with those young people from that ladder? Making them into what? Tokens, right? That they don't really represent anything, but they're maybe just themselves, and they're going to probably feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I think in a community, in a healthy community, everybody is involved in making some contributions. We're all involved in projects. That could be we're involved in a planning role, we're involved in implementing a project, maybe we're helping with recruiting people to come to the 4-H program, for example, for our young people. At the second level, we're giving young people opportunities to provide input. Adults may end up making the ultimate decision or deciding about resources, but you have an advisory board of young people that are listened to. Maybe you do some survey work, but you have other ways for young people to have input, to be consulted about what happens. And then if you're bringing young people into shared leadership, then you're focusing on issues that have importance for the community, for the organization as a whole, having full voting rights on a board, for example. And if you think about communities, I live in Madison, Wisconsin. It's a city, an urban place, but it's a very engaged, vibrant political community. I'm really involved in our school system. God forbid I ever get elected to the school board. So I don't want to necessarily be in charge of that and have that shared leadership responsibility. I want to go to the meeting and say what I think sometimes. But that doesn't make me feel like we don't have an inclusive process in the community. We don't always have to be at the top for everything. Can you get the next one? So I showed some young people in a workshop that image, and they said, you know, the triangle, that pyramid thing, it makes us all want to go to the top. And I say, no, it's about the bottom being the base for the top, the bottom being the foundation for everything else. And they said, no, it doesn't really, it just makes us want to be at the top. It's a hierarchical thing. And so we played around with some images, and we played around with this one, that really these are gears turning, and that all of those gears can move the whole thing. Sometimes it's coming from the top, sometimes it's coming from the bottom, but we really need to have all those gears in motion in order for things to work. If one of those is frozen up, we're not gonna have a community that really is authentically engaging young people. We're gonna have some tokenistic activities. That said, you gotta start someplace, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You maybe can't get all of these three things moving at the same time. So let's have next one. We're going to do a polling slide in a minute, so I'm hoping that folks have logged into the Adobe Connect thing. You're going to choose which of these 4 reasons you think is most important to you for involving young people. And when I say young people, Some of you maybe not work very much with 4-H age or school age young people. You may work with young adults, and I would encourage you to think about those 20-somethings also as folks that are probably not brought into the community leadership structure as much as they might be. So we've been talking about in Wisconsin about 4 reasons that we involve young people and young adults in community leadership and what we call youth and governance. The first is that it's good for the kids, that they develop skills, they develop an identity as leaders, they develop leadership skills, they develop lots of things that they can use for employment, for their own personal growth, for their own active citizenships as individuals. So that's one reason that it's a really great learning opportunity for young people. The second reason is that it creates a stronger civic culture in our communities, that we need young people to step up and run for office. We need young people to participate in our political process. We need young people to be active leaders in our communities. So it's part of civic development. And think about the folks in your community who might be really concerned about who's running for office and who's stepping into those formal roles in communities. The third piece is that it gives young people a voice. We live in a democracy. We all have freedom of speech. We're all supposed to be able to participate in our political life and in our communities. It gives young people representation, and they have a right to be represented. They have a perspective that they can share. And often those perspectives are unheard if we don't create opportunities for them to be heard. And the fourth thing is that communities actually tangibly can benefit. We have some communities that have really been transformed and changed really significantly by the work that's happening with young people and young adults. And that we're also building social networks. We're helping young people engage with adults and others in the community. And what are communities made of? Relationships and networks. The stronger we make communities, this goes back to old sociology stuff, the more networks, the more the depth of those, the deeper those networks are, the richer those networks are, the more community we actually have. That's the very definition of community. So we've got the first polling slide. And I want to think there's 4 things. For you yourself as an individual and as a professional, where you sit in your organizational work, which of those 4 things do you think is the most important reason to engage young people and young adults in your community?
No, we got it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the votes are still coming in, but it looks like the folks in this room really think that positive youth development is the thing that motivates you most to do that. And that's an important thing to think about. If you're going to be talking to your colleagues about this subject, maybe this is the piece to lead with. How good is this for young people, right? So let's try the second poll. So let's see, actually, before we move that on, we've got about 2/3 of the room thinking about positive youth development. The second group is thinking about youth voice and representation, and just a few people thinking about civic development and community improvement as the outcomes. Okay? So let's do the second poll. Think about your stakeholders in your community leaders, leaders of other organizations, your school partners, your county boards, those kind of folks. Why do you think they would be interested in engaging young people and young adults in communities? For them, is it about positive youth development and building youth skills? Is it about future citizens or current citizens? Is it about hearing from young people, getting their voice into the public space, or is it about making the community a better place? All right, we've got some different answers. So about 2/3 of you now look like you're selecting community improvement. They want to see something different in the community as a result. And this is an interesting perspective. You're thinking like community development folks. When Will talks, when we've had this interdisciplinary conversation, our youth development folks tend to think about success as we've got young people together, they've got skills, they're launched. They may go off to New York City and hallelujah, right? And be successful. The community folks, that's a negative for some of them. It's like, wait a minute, we just lost one of our assets that we invested so much in, right? So there really is a different way of thinking. I think it's artificial to set this up as a dichotomy, but I think there are different perspectives and different reasons for doing this. Let's try the third one. which is focusing on the young people. Think about the young people that you work with. What do you think motivates them to get involved at the community level? Is it about building their own skills, building their resume maybe? Is it about being citizens? Is it about having a voice? Or is it about making their community a better place? So we don't have as many responders. I don't know what that means. People are, I think, is there another committee meeting going on, or are they just done? Okay. All right. Okay, that's a kind of feedback, I suppose, right? So again, about 2/3 of you now have chosen youth voice and representation. It's interesting. So you think about like, and I think you're onto something here. Obviously, you know, I don't have to dwell on this, but the young people see a need to both build their own skills and also to feel like they've got something to share with communities. And interesting that only one person chose community improvement, because I just asked you to choose one, but I think young people often profoundly care about what their communities are like and profoundly want to make a difference in that and see a real need to do that. And they may want to be heard as part of that. But okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So given the short time, what I'm going to share is just some really quick results. I will share some really quick results where a few, there we go, of this evaluation work we did in Wisconsin with 4-H Youth Development members who are 4-H Club members, but also members of our other youth development work that we do, team courts involving young people in community coalitions, camp counselors, whatever that might be. And my screen is not showing the right thing. So I'm just going to quickly run over these, but this talks about what are young people doing in our 4-H Youth Development Programming, because that's one of the things we even wanted. What kind of experiences are they having? So you'll see that most of them were, the number one answer is that they have been club officers, that they have had leadership training, they've been to conferences and things like that. Then they've served on 4-H county committees. We have 35% of our young people, 6th grade and older, it was a random sample of our 4-H members, have served on some kind of a county committee, so that's an important leadership piece. They've been leaders and organizers of after-school programs. They've been involved in 4-H leadership groups. They've been 4-H camp counselors. A much smaller number have been state team members, community coalition members, team court panelists. And median young person had 2 of those experiences. Or local government representatives, but still significant numbers of young people responded that they've had those experiences. And the median young person had 2 of those experiences, but like 40% of them had 4 or more of those different kinds of experiences. We're providing a diverse kind of experience to our young people. So the next one, I just want to talk quickly about what they're getting out of it. Leadership skills, this is what we often talk about, life skills. About a half, and this may be hard to read, but just trust me that about a half to 2/3 of them say that they're building teamwork, inclusiveness, communication, planning and organizing, and decision-making skills, which I don't think is that high, frankly. And we went and talked to them, and they said to us, yes, yeah, we're learning a lot from 4-H, but we're also learning those things in a lot of other places in our lives. And so 4-H makes a contribution, but it's not the only thing and not the big thing. So let's go to the next one. We also, our second piece that we were focusing on is leadership identity. Do you think of yourself as a leader? The question is like, does 4-H make you more likely to accept? You're starting to think here about how to individual action. We also have to think about the 3 things that we talked about. The skills they develop, their own identity, you know the responsibility for doing a job when something needs to be done, or do you understand your leadership skills? And these results are a little bit higher. 79% were motivated. 77% were
If you think about that, the search assets, this is the option. And so, Richard Learning, I'm sure you've been following that. Contributions. So I would argue that community youth development is the kind of development context that we really rebuild skills, utilize the most important thing. I think I'm hoping that
So, particularly accepting responsibility for doing a job and helping a team reach its goals, so feeling efficacious as a leader, feeling like they can help someone do that. And you're starting to think here about not only individual action, but collective action, and those came through a little bit more strongly. And then the third one. We also asked young people about whether they're building community connections. So we have three. This is the opposite stuff, right? This is I'm being invited. I'm feeling like I have a contribution to making my community. And so Richard Lerner, I'm sure you've been following the National 4-H study, and I'm going to just really quickly talk about, probably skip over some, we also have some qualitative data, but just to talk about what does a young person say about stepping up and taking responsibility. There's a Buffalo County, Wisconsin young person serving on a prevention coalition with adults. And he felt a real responsibility to step into leadership roles. He says, when I know that no one else at the community level. And then on community connections, we talked to young people in Florence County who really saw themselves as part of a larger community. And these are 16, 17-year-olds. And I think it's one of the most powerful things you can have as a human being is seeing how you fit into a larger collective. So just a few practices that called youth programs as builders of social capital, and a national team of folks worked on putting this together. And so the findings in here that young people need to be doing things that are real. We have young people serving on teen courts in Wisconsin. Is that something you have in Nebraska? Teen courts, peer courts? Extension's involved with a lot of those. It's a wonderful youth development opportunity where young people sit on a panel, and when there's been a transgression of some kind in the community, the young people themselves work with the respondent to think about the consequences of their action. So the Viles County Teen Courts say, it's exciting to be in that role, and you take responsibility and pride in making your own choices because you know that this is a real deal, and someone else's life is really being implicated. And so one thing is that things are authentic. That happens within our 4-H youth programs as well. When we have young people sitting on our leaderboards and making decisions about what programs are going to move forward, what changes are going to be made in camp, what changes are going to be made in a project area, they're making decisions that have real consequences, and so they're going to take those seriously. So that's authentic. The second piece really is that it's consequential and observable. And this is, I think, a key thing that Steve found in Missouri was that you can have young people. It's wonderful when 4-H clubs go and visit the senior home and build a relationship with elderly folks and provide some service. And I hope that keeps happening. But it doesn't really change. The whole community becomes the audience for that program and not just the folks at the senior center. And so he talks about the need to think about who in your community, and we'll do this in a minute, who in your community is doing something really consequential. I was talking with, in some ways, an advantage for people to take a more significant role. And the other piece in rural communities, I guess, is to focus a little bit on youth-adult partnership. I think it's easier in some ways. It may not be the cultural norm in every community, but people already know each other. They already have relationships. That can make things a little sticky sometimes, but for the most part, that enables you to bring people together in a way that makes sense, which is a little bit harder in the urban communities. Let's go to the next one. I'll kind of race through a couple things here. So there are lots of opportunities for youth and rural partnership, and is that something that you talk about very much in Nebraska? Yeah. So I probably don't need to preach to the choir too much, But a few things about youth and adult partnership that are important. One is that if you're taking on a long-term project, that it's sustained over some time. That if you're involved in a 3-year project to work on pollinators in Lincoln, that you bring young people and adults together over a course of time, bring them together at the beginning, keep them engaged with each other. They will learn from each other in a mutual way. The young people will have things to offer the adults that the adults would not. They'll have access to things that the adults wouldn't otherwise know, and the young people have an opportunity to learn from the adults too. We know that education happens in the context of relationships, so this needs to happen over time. And then I would also urge people to think about, in Nebraska, do you have boards and committees that operate your 4-H programs? Do you have a lot of project committees, or we have leaders associations in Wisconsin? You have leaders associations that kind of are charged with managing things, volunteers. How many people have young people sitting in the majority of those committees? Folks, okay. How many would say you've got really good youth adult partnerships going? Raise your hand really high if you think you've got really good youth adult partnerships going in those things. And how many people are kind of like, depends. It's hard work, right? It's not the way we always do business, but there's a lot of it going on all around us. I think community coalitions, how many folks have sit on prevention coalitions or other youth organizing coalitions in their communities? And how many of you have young people sitting with you at those tables? Okay, and reacting at your table right now. Other community? And when you think about your community, who in your community has the opportunity and the capacity to sustain youth adult partnerships? This would be React 1. So the first question is, who in your community is really interested in doing youth adult partnership and promoting the positive youth development of young people? And I want you to report back, of these stakeholders, who can engage youth and adults as partners in projects with high public visibility. So just to kick out some ideas of opportunities you think of high public visibility.